Dad, we need to talk. Those 5 words hit me harder than the wrench that slipped from my oil-stained fingers and clanged against the concrete floor of my garage. I looked up from under the hood of Mrs. Johnson's Buick to see my daughter, Emily, standing in the doorway, her designer heels clicking nervously against the threshold. She was holding something behind her back, and the way she wouldn't meet my eyes told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be good. I wiped my hands on the shop rag tucked into my coveralls, the same navy blue uniform I'd worn to work for the past 23 years at Danny's Auto Repair. Emily's nose wrinkled slightly at the smell of motor oil and brake fluid that seemed permanently embedded in my skin, no matter how hard I scrubbed. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I asked, though part of me already knew. It had been building for weeks now, ever since she'd gotten engaged to Michael Harrison III. The way she'd started speaking differently around his family. The way she'd begun introducing me as a family friend instead of her father. The way she'd stopped inviting me to dinners with her fiancé's parents. Emily took a deep breath and stepped fully into the garage, her perfectly manicured hand finally revealing what she'd been hiding. A cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. My wedding invitation. "The thing is," she began, her voice taking on that careful, measured tone she'd learned at Harvard Law. "Michael's family is very traditional. They have certain expectations about what?" I interrupted gently, though my chest was already tightening. She looked everywhere but at me, at the oil stains on the floor, at the calendar on the wall still showing last month's pin-up model holding a wrench, at the collection of coffee cans filled with nuts and bolts I'd been sorting for 30 years. "About appearances?" she finally whispered. The words hung in the air between us like exhaust fumes on a cold morning. I set down the rag and really looked at my daughter, this brilliant, beautiful woman I'd raised alone since her mother died when she was 8. She was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, her hair pulled back in that sleek style that made her look like she belonged in boardrooms instead of garages. "Emily," I said carefully, "what exactly are you trying to tell me?" She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering courage I knew she had in spades. This was the same girl who'd stood up to bullies in elementary school, who'd argued her way onto the debate team in high school, who'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard. But right now she looked like that 8-year-old who used to hide behind my legs when strangers came to the door. "Michael's father is a federal judge," she said, as if that explained everything. "His mother chairs the symphony board. Their friends are senators and CEOs, and..." She gestured helplessly at the garage around us. "They're not used to people like us." "People like us," I repeated slowly. "You know what I mean, Dad. Blue collar, working class." The words came out like an apology. "I've worked so hard to build a life to create something better than what Emily..." She flinched at the quiet hurt in my voice. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of traffic on Route 9, the sound of people heading home from their jobs, good, honest jobs that apparently weren't good enough for my daughter's new world. "The wedding is going to be at the Ritz-Carlton," she said finally. 300 guests. The governor might even come. And I think it would be better if I wasn't there." It wasn't a question. I'd been around long enough to read between the lines to understand what people meant when they couldn't quite say what they meant. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I'm sorry, Dad. I love you, you know I do. But this isn't just about me anymore. This is about my future, my career, the life I'm trying to build. Michael's family has connections, opportunities. They could open doors for me that That your embarrassing father might close, I finished. Please don't make this harder than it has to be, she whispered. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. When had she started caring more about other people's opinions than her own father's heart? When had she begun measuring love in terms of social currency? But I also saw something else. I saw the little girl who used to sit on a milk crate in this very garage, handing me tools and asking a million questions about how engines worked. I saw the teenager who'd cried in my arms when kids at school made fun of her secondhand clothes. I saw the young woman who'd called me sobbing with joy when she got into Harvard, thanking me for believing in her when no one else would. That girl was still in there somewhere. She had to be. If that's what you want, I said quietly, then I understand. Relief flooded her face, followed immediately by guilt. It's just for the wedding, Dad. After that, things can go back to normal. Normal. As if there was anything normal about a daughter ashamed of the man who'd raised her, who'd sacrificed everything to give her the opportunities she was now using to shut him out. Of course, I said. I wouldn't want to embarrass you. She winced at that, but didn't contradict me. Instead, she set the invitation on my workbench, a beautiful piece of cardstock that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a week, and kissed my cheek. Her lips barely grazed my skin, as if she was afraid the smell of honest work might somehow contaminate her. I love you, Dad, she said, but the words felt hollow, like an obligation rather than a truth. I love you too, sweetheart. I always have. After she left, I stood alone in the garage for a long time staring at that invitation. The gold lettering caught the light from the bare bulb overhead, spelling out names and dates and times for a celebration I wasn't welcome to attend. Then I walked to my small office in the back corner, opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder I'd been adding to for 20 years. The tab read, Emily's Future, in my careful handwriting. Inside were receipts, bank statements, canceled checks, payment confirmations, all the evidence of a secret I'd kept for 2 decades, a secret that was about to change everything. Because my daughter thought she knew who her father was, just a simple mechanic with dirty hands and an embarrassing job. What she didn't know was that every single thing she'd achieved, every door that had opened for her, every opportunity she'd been given, had been paid for by those same dirty hands she was now ashamed of. And tomorrow, she was going to find out. I closed the folder and smiled for the first time in weeks. Emily wanted to keep up appearances. Well, she was about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving indeed. After all, I'd been keeping up the biggest appearance of all. I sat in my cramped office until well past midnight, the folder spread open like a road map of everything I'd given up for the daughter who no longer wanted me in her life. The numbers told a story Emily had never bothered to ask about, a story written in sacrifice and sealed with a father's love. 20 years of secrets stared back at me from those yellowed papers. It started with the first receipt I'd saved September 15th, 2003. $847 for Emily's enrollment at St. Mary's Preparatory Academy. She was 13 then, brilliant beyond her years, but trapped in a public school system that was failing kids like her. I remember the night I'd made that decision, sitting at this same desk with a calculator and a stack of bills, trying to figure out how to make the impossible possible. The math was brutal. My salary at Danny's barely covered our rent and groceries. But Emily had scored in the 99th percentile on her placement tests, and the guidance counselor had pulled me aside after the results came in. Mr. Davis, she'd said, your daughter has a gift, but she needs the right environment to nurture it. So I'd taken a second job. Night security at the industrial complex downtown, working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then driving straight to the garage for my regular shift. For 5 years, I lived on 4 hours of sleep and instant coffee. But Emily never knew. She thought the private school had given her a partial scholarship. I picked up another receipt. $1,200 for SAT prep courses. I'd told her it was free through the school. The truth was, I'd started driving for a delivery service on weekends, spending my only days off hauling furniture and appliances across the state just to pay for those Saturday morning sessions that would eventually get her into Harvard. Harvard. My fingers found the acceptance letter I'd made a copy of before she moved to Cambridge. I'd cried, reading it actually cried, standing in this very office while Emily was out celebrating with friends. Not because I was sad, but because I was so damn proud I thought my chest might explode. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning for that moment since she was 8 years old. The night of her mother's funeral, I'd held Emily as she sobbed against my chest, her small body shaking with grief that no child should have to carry. "I'm scared, Daddy," she'd whispered. "What if I can't be smart like Mommy was?" Her mother, Jennifer, had been the academic in our family. PhD in literature from Yale, working as a professor at the local community college. She'd married beneath her station, everyone said so. But she'd never made me feel like anything less than her equal. Jennifer saw potential in people, especially in our daughter. "Promise me something," Jennifer had said during those final weeks in the hospital, her voice weak but determined. "Promise me you'll give Emily every opportunity. Don't let her settle for less because of where she comes from." I'd promised. And I'd kept that promise in ways Emily would never understand. The Harvard years were the hardest. $70,000 a year in tuition, room, and board. I'd told Emily she'd received a full merit scholarship from an anonymous donor. She'd believed it because she wanted to believe it, because it fit the narrative she'd constructed about her own brilliance. The anonymous donor was me. I'd sold everything I owned except this house, my fishing boat that I had spent 10 years restoring, my father's vintage Mustang that I had planned to give Emily someday, my mother's wedding ring, the one I'd been saving for Emily's engagement. Everything went to pay for her education, and I'd gotten creative with the rest. 3 jobs became 4. I'd started doing freelance electrical work under the table. I'd flipped cars on weekends, buying wrecks and fixing them up in this garage, then selling them for just enough profit to cover another semester. I donated plasma twice a week for 2 years, $50 a session that I'd squirrel away for her textbooks and lab fees. Emily never asked where her money came from. She was too busy being brilliant, too focused on her studies, to wonder how a mechanic's daughter could afford Harvard without loans. She'd graduated summa cum laude editor of the Law Review with job offers from the most prestigious firms in Boston. I'd been so proud I'd driven to Cambridge just to watch her walk across that stage. She never saw me in the crowd, tucked away in the cheap seats with all the other families who'd scraped together everything they had to be there. But I saw her. I saw her smile, her confidence, the way she carried herself like she owned the world. And in a way she did, because I'd given it to her. The folder contained more recent receipts too. Her apartment in Boston, I'd co-signed the lease and quietly covered the security deposit when her credit wasn't quite enough. Her car, a graduation gift, she thought came from her law firm's signing bonus. Her engagement ring, Jesus, that engagement ring. Michael had come to me 6 months ago, nervous and formal, asking for my blessing to marry my daughter. "I want to give her the perfect ring," he'd said. "But I'm just starting at the firm, and Emily has such refined taste." I'd liked him in that moment. He genuinely loved my daughter, that much was clear. So I'd made some calls, found a jeweler who owed me a favor from way back, and arranged for Michael to get the ring at cost. Emily had been over the moon, posting pictures on social media gushing about how thoughtful and generous her fiancé was. She never knew the 3-carat diamond she was showing off had been paid for by her embarrassing father. And now, the wedding? The Ritz-Carlton. The venue deposit I'd wired just last week, $50,000 that had wiped out the last of my savings. The catering contract for $30,000. The florist, the photographer, the band, all of it arranged through a shell company I'd set up, all of it funded by a man she was too ashamed to invite. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my office. The walls were covered with pictures of Emily's school plays, graduation ceremonies, her first day at Harvard, her law school graduation. In every photo, she was smiling, confident, reaching for something bigger than the life she'd started with. In every photo, I was nowhere to be seen. That was by design. I'd learned early that the best way to help Emily succeed was to stay in the background, to let her believe she'd earned everything through her own merit. I thought I was giving her confidence, teaching her that she could achieve anything she set her mind to. I never imagined she'd grow ashamed of the man who'd made it all possible. My phone buzzed. A text message from the wedding planner. Final payment due tomorrow for Harrison wedding. Please confirm wire transfer details. I stared at the message for a long time. Tomorrow I would transfer another $25,000 to cover the final balance for a wedding I wasn't invited to attend. I would pay for flowers that would beautify a room I'd never see, music that would celebrate a love I'd helped nurture, food that would feed guests who thought I wasn't worthy of their company. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it was time for Emily to learn the truth about sacrifice. Maybe it was time for her to understand what true class really meant. I picked up my phone and typed a response to the wedding planner. We need to schedule a meeting. There's been a change of plans. Then I closed the folder and walked upstairs to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. Emily thought she knew her father. She thought she knew where her success had come from. She thought she could build a new life by leaving the old one behind. She was about to discover how wrong she was about all of it. The meeting with the wedding planner was scheduled for 3 o'clock. By noon, I'd already decided what I was going to do. But first, I needed to hear it from Emily's own lips one more time. Needed to be absolutely certain that the daughter I'd raised had truly become someone I no longer recognized. I drove to her law firm in downtown Boston, my old pickup truck looking wildly out of place among the BMWs and Mercedes in the parking garage. The security guard gave me a look like I'd wandered into the wrong building, but Emily's name got me a visitor's badge and directions to the 32nd floor. The elevator ride felt like ascending to another world. By the time the doors opened, I was standing in a gleaming lobby with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the harbor. The receptionist, a young woman who probably made more than I did, smiled politely and announced my arrival. "Emily, your father is here to see you." Even from across the lobby, I could hear Emily's sharp intake of breath through the phone. My father, no. 5 minutes later, she appeared in the lobby, her face tight with barely concealed irritation. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her hair pulled back in that severe style that made her look like she was preparing for battle. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I'm in the middle of preparing for a deposition." "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding," I said simply. "Maybe we could grab lunch." She glanced around the lobby nervously, as if my presence was somehow contaminating her professional environment. "I can't. I have meetings all afternoon. Can't this wait?" "It's important, Emily." Something in my tone must have registered because she sighed and checked her watch. "Fine, but just for a few minutes. There's a cafe downstairs." The cafe was one of those upscale places where a sandwich cost $20 and the coffee came with foam art. Emily ordered a kale salad and sparkling water. I asked for black coffee and nothing else, not because I wasn't hungry, but because I'd looked at the prices and decided my money was better spent elsewhere. "So what's this about?" Emily asked, cutting her salad into precise mechanical bites. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about appearances, about not wanting to embarrass you." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Dad, please don't make this about—" "I'm not making it about anything," I interrupted gently. "I'm just trying to understand. Help me understand when I became something you needed to hide from." Emily set down her fork and looked around the cafe again, that same nervous glance she'd given in the lobby. "Keep your voice down, please. Why afraid someone might find out you have a father who works with his hands? That's not fair. Isn't it?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice to the whisper she seemed to prefer. "Emily, I raised you. I changed your diapers, taught you to ride a bike, helped you with your homework every night for 12 years. I held you when you cried, celebrated every achievement, believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. And now you're telling me I'm too embarrassing to be seen at your wedding?" Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Michael's family has expectations." "About what? About who you are, about where you came from. About the kind of people we associate with." She said the words coming out in a rush. "His father is a federal judge, Dad. His mother chairs 3 different charity boards. They move in circles where image matters, where first impressions can make or break careers." And what impression would I make? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth she couldn't bring herself to say. "You work in a garage," she said finally. "Your hands are always stained with grease. You drive a 20-year-old pickup truck. You live in the same small house I grew up in, and you've never traveled anywhere or done anything." She trailed off, realizing how cruel she sounded. "Anything important?" I finished for her. "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." I took a sip of my coffee, surprised by how calm I felt. "Emily, let me ask you something. Do you know how much Harvard costs?" She blinked, caught off guard by the change of subject. "I had a scholarship. The anonymous donor program, remember? Do you know how much the Ritz-Carlton charges for a wedding reception? Michael's family is helping with. No, they're not." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a single piece of paper, a bank statement showing the wire transfer I'd made to the venue. "Do you know who made the deposit for your wedding, Emily?" She stared at the paper, her face growing pale. "I don't understand." "Your wedding venue, your catering, your flowers, your Harvard education, your apartment in Boston, your car, even your engagement ring. Do you want to know who really paid for all of it?" "Stop," she whispered. "The anonymous donor who funded your scholarship?" "That was me, Emily. Every semester, every year. I worked 4 jobs to pay for your education while you thought you'd earned it all on your merit." "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and showed her the banking app, scrolling through years of transfers. Harvard University, Ritz-Carlton Boston, Premier Catering, Somerset Florists. Transaction after transaction, each one representing weeks of overtime, sacrifice meals, and sleepless nights. "Your embarrassing father," I said quietly, "has spent the last 20 years making sure you had every opportunity to become successful. I sold everything I owned to pay for your dreams. I worked myself half to death so you could graduate debt-free and start your career without the burden most kids your age carry." Emily's hands were shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to believe in yourself. I wanted you to feel like you'd earned your success through your own intelligence and hard work. I never wanted you to feel like you owed me anything. But I do owe you. I owe you everything. I shook my head. You don't owe me anything, Emily. That's what parents do. We sacrifice for our children because we love them, not because we expect something in return. She was crying now, tears running down her cheeks and onto her expensive suit. I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't know. I never asked. You never asked because you didn't want to know. It was easier to believe you'd done it all yourself than to wonder how a mechanic's daughter could afford Harvard. Please don't say it like that. Like what? Like the truth. I leaned back in my chair, studying my daughter's face. Emily, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I'm proud of your intelligence, your work ethic, your success, but I'm not proud of who you've become. The words hit her like a slap. Dad, you've become someone who measures people by their bank accounts and their job titles. Someone who's ashamed of the very foundation that made her success possible. Someone who would rather lie about her family than admit she came from humble beginnings. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you visited me? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you introduced me as your father instead of a family friend? She had no answer for that. I have a meeting with your wedding planner at 3 o'clock today, I continued. I'm going to give her a choice. She can keep my money and plan a wedding that honors the values your mother and I tried to teach you, values like loyalty, humility, and respect for the people who love you, or what? Or she can give my money back and you can plan your own wedding with your own resources. You can see how far your Harvard law degree gets you when you're starting from scratch the way most people do. Emily's face went white. You wouldn't. I would. In fact, I think I will. I stood up and threw a $10 bill on the table to cover my coffee. Because maybe it's time you learned what your embarrassing father has known all along, that true class isn't about money or connections or keeping up appearances. It's about character. It's about knowing who you are and where you came from, and never being ashamed of either. Dad, please, don't do this. I'll change. I'll be better. I looked down at my daughter, this brilliant, successful woman who had everything she'd ever wanted, but had lost sight of everything that mattered. I hope you will, Emily. I really do. But first, you need to understand what it feels like to stand on your own 2 feet. You need to learn the difference between earning something and inheriting it. Why? What about the wedding? What about Michael? That's up to you. If he loves you for who you really are, a mechanic's daughter who got lucky enough to have opportunities, then he'll stand by you. If he only loves the image you've created, then maybe he's not the man you should be marrying anyway. I walked away, then leaving my daughter sitting alone in that expensive cafe surrounded by the life she'd built on a foundation she'd never bothered to acknowledge. Part of me wanted to turn around to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But the bigger part of me knew that sometimes love means letting people fall so they can learn to pick themselves up. By 3:30, I'd met with the wedding planner and withdrawn every penny I'd invested in Emily's perfect day. By 4 o'clock, the vendors had been notified. By 5 o'clock, my daughter's wedding was officially canceled. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The phone started ringing at 6:15 that evening. I was in my garage doing what I'd always done. When the world felt like it was spinning too fast working with my hands. There's something honest about an engine that won't start, something pure about the process of diagnosis and repair. Unlike people, machines don't lie to you. They don't pretend to be something they're not. When they're broken, they tell you exactly what's wrong. I let the phone ring. By 7 o'clock, I'd counted 14 missed calls from Emily and 3 from Michael. My voicemail was full of increasingly frantic messages, but I wasn't ready to listen to them yet. I had work to do. Mrs. Johnson's Buick was finally purring like a kitten after I'd replaced the timing belt. Simple problem, really. The old belt had been worn down to nothing, causing the whole system to fall out of sync. Sometimes you have to replace the foundation before everything else can work properly. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 7:30, headlights swept across my garage door. I looked up from under the hood to see Michael's BMW pulling into my driveway. He climbed out, looking like he'd been hit by a truck tie. Askew hair disheveled the confident composure I'd seen at family dinners, completely shattered. "Mr. Davis," he called as he approached the garage. "Please, I need to talk to you." I wiped my hands on my rag and straightened up slowly. "Michael, you look like hell." Emily told me what happened. About the wedding being canceled. About everything. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me of Emily when she was frustrated. I had no idea about any of it. "What exactly did Emily tell you?" "That you've been paying for everything. Her education, the wedding, all of it. That the anonymous donor for her scholarship was you." He leaned against the workbench, looking exhausted. "She's been crying for 3 hours straight. She keeps saying she ruined everything." I studied Michael's face in the fluorescent light of the garage. He was a good-looking kid, tall, well-built, with the kind of easy confidence that came from growing up with money. But right now he looked genuinely shaken. "And what do you think about that?" I asked. "I think I've been an idiot," he said without hesitation. "I think I've been so caught up in my family's expectations that I forgot what really matters. Which is Emily. The real Emily. Not the version she thinks she needs to be around my parents." He met my eyes directly. "Mr. Davis, I love your daughter. Not because of where she went to school or what kind of job she has or whether she fits into my family's social circle. I love her because she's brilliant and determined and because she sees the world in ways that challenge me to be better." I nodded slowly. "But you never stood up for her when your family made their little comments about her background." Michael flinched. "You're right. I should have. I was a coward. I let her think she had to be ashamed of where she came from, because it was easier than confronting my parents' prejudices. And now I want to make it right. But she won't talk to me. She's convinced that once my family finds out the truth about the wedding being canceled, they'll never accept her. She thinks I'll walk away." I picked up a wrench and turned it over in my hands, feeling its familiar weight. "Will you?" "No." The answer came fast and firm. "Never. But I need your help. My help. I need you to give me a chance to prove that I'm not the shallow ass I've been acting like. I need you to let me show Emily and you that I can be the kind of man who deserves to be part of this family." The word family hung in the air between us. It was the first time anyone from Emily's new world had used that word to include me. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Michael took a deep breath. "First, I want to tell my parents the truth. All of it. About the canceled wedding, about Emily's real background, about what an incredible man her father is. And if they can't handle that, then they can skip our wedding. And second, I want to pay you back. Every penny you spent on the wedding, on her education, all of it. It might take me years, but I want to do it. I shook my head. That's not how it works, son. I didn't spend that money as a loan. I spent it as a father. Then let me earn it another way. Let me prove I'm worthy of her. Of both of you. I studied Michael for a long moment. There was something different about him tonight, a humility I hadn't seen before, a willingness to be vulnerable that reminded me of Emily when she was young. You really love her? I said. It wasn't a question. More than I thought it was possible to love another person. Even if she comes with a blue-collar father who smells like motor oil. Michael actually smiled at that. Especially then. Do you know what she told me on our second date? She said her father was the smartest man she'd ever met. That he could fix anything that was broken, and that he'd taught her that honest work was something to be proud of, not ashamed of. She said that she did, and I fell in love with her a little bit more because of the way her whole face lit up when she talked about you. It wasn't until we got engaged that she started changing, started worrying about what other people thought. I set down the wrench and really looked at this young man who wanted to marry my daughter. Maybe I'd misjudged him. Maybe he wasn't the problem. Maybe he was part of the solution. Michael, I said, what would you say if I told you I was thinking about reinstating the wedding? His eyes widened. I'd say that would be the best news I've heard all day. But not at the Ritz-Carlton. Not with 300 guests trying to impress each other with how important they are. Where then? I gestured around the garage at the workbenches and tool cabinets at the concrete floor, where I'd spent most of my adult life building something with my hands. Here, I said, in my backyard, with the people who actually matter. Your family if they can handle being around folks like us. Some of my friends from work, Mrs. Johnson from down the street, people who know what real love looks like. Michael was quiet for a moment, processing what I was suggesting. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. Emily would love that, he said. The real Emily would love that. You think so? I know so. She's been so stressed about the Ritz wedding, trying to plan something that would impress people instead of something that would make her happy. But a wedding here with you? This is what she really wants. She just forgot how to ask for it. We shook hands then, standing in my garage surrounded by the tools and machines that had built Emily's future. It felt like a new beginning. There's just one condition, I said. Anything. You help me plan it. Not some fancy wedding planner, not your mother's event coordinator. You and me working together to give Emily something real. Something that honors where she came from and where she's going. Michael nodded eagerly. I'd be honored. As he was leaving, Michael turned back one more time. Mr. Davis, thank you for giving me a second chance, for raising such an incredible daughter, for teaching me what real class looks like. After his taillights disappeared down the street, I walked back into my garage and picked up the phone. Emily had left 17 more voicemails while I'd been talking to Michael. I scrolled to the most recent one and hit play. Dad, please call me back. I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you and I know I was wrong. I don't care about the wedding. I don't care about any of it. I just want my father back. I want to come home and sit in your garage and listen to you explain how engines work like I did when I was little. Please, Dad. I love you. I've always loved you. I just forgot how to show it. Her voice was thick with tears broken with genuine remorse. This was my little girl again, the one who used to hand me tools and ask a million questions. The one who'd cried in my arms when her mother died and trusted me to keep her world from falling apart. I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Dad? Hey, sweetheart. How would you feel about having your wedding in your old man's backyard?" The silence stretched for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her crying again, but these were different tears. "I'd love that more than anything in the world," she whispered. "Good," I said, "because we've got a lot of work to do and not much time to do it. Think you remember how to hand me tools?" "I remember everything, Dad. Everything that matters." And for the first time since this whole mess started, I believed that was true. 3 weeks later, I stood in my backyard at 6 in the morning, watching the sun paint golden streaks across the grass, where my daughter would say her wedding vows in 8 hours. The space had been transformed, but not in the way you might expect. There were no crystal chandeliers or imported flowers. Instead, Emily and I had strung simple white lights between the oak trees, the same trees where I'd hung her swing when she was 7. The altar was built from reclaimed wood old fence posts I'd saved in my garage, sanded smooth, and assembled by my own hands, with Michael working beside me every evening for 2 weeks. The chairs were borrowed from the church down the street, mismatched but sturdy. Mrs. Johnson had contributed her grandmother's lace tablecloths for the reception tables we'd set up on my back deck. My buddy Jake from the garage had insisted on handling the music with his old sound system and a collection of vinyl records that would make any wedding planner cringe. It was perfect. The screen door creaked behind me, and I turned to see Emily stepping onto the deck, coffee mug in hand. She was wearing my old flannel shirt over her pajamas, her hair pulled back in the same messy ponytail she'd worn as a teenager on Saturday mornings. "Morning, Dad. Morning, sweetheart. Nervous?" She joined me at the deck railing, looking out over our makeshift wedding venue. "Not nervous. Excited. This feels right, you know. This feels like home. It is home." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, father and daughter watching the world wake up together. In a few hours, this yard would be full of people, not the 300 strangers Emily had originally planned to impress, but 67 people who actually mattered. My crew from Danny's garage, Emily's law school friends who'd known her before she started worrying about appearances, Michael's parents who had surprised everyone by embracing the backyard wedding idea with genuine enthusiasm once they understood what it represented. "Dad," Emily said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I wrote my vows last night and I realized something. They're not really about Michael. I mean, they are, but they're also about you. About what you taught me about love." I sipped my coffee, waiting for her to continue. "I spent so many years trying to become someone else, someone I thought was better than who I really am. But you never tried to be anything other than exactly who you are. You loved me when I was ungrateful. You supported me when I was ashamed of you. You kept believing in me even when I stopped believing in myself. That's what fathers do." "No," she said, turning to face me. "That's what extraordinary fathers do. And I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." Before I could respond, Michael appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his tuxedo. He looked nervous as hell, which made me smile. A man should be nervous on his wedding day. It means he understands the weight of what he's promising. "Mr. Davis, Emily, sorry to interrupt, but my parents just arrived and they're asking about parking." "Tell them to park wherever they can find space," I said. "This isn't the Ritz. We don't have valet service." Michael grinned. I already did. My father parked his Mercedes behind Mrs. Johnson's pickup truck and said it was the most relaxed he'd felt at a wedding in years. Emily laughed, the first genuine, unguarded laugh I'd heard from her in months. Your father said that. He also asked if he could help with setup. He's currently in the garage with your dad's friend Jake, trying to figure out how to work a record player. I shook my head, amazed. A federal judge operating a turntable. Your mother would have loved to see that. She would have. Emily agreed, her voice soft with memory. She always said the best parties happened in kitchens and backyards, not ballrooms. The morning flew by in a blur of activity. Emily's maid of honor arrived with a dress bag and immediately got pressed into service, helping my neighbor hang more lights. Michael's best man showed up early and ended up moving tables with the guys from the garage. By noon, the distinction between wedding party and work crew had completely disappeared. At 2 o'clock, Emily retreated to her old bedroom to get ready. An hour later, I knocked on her door. You ready, sweetheart? Come in, Dad. I opened the door to find my daughter in her wedding dress, not the elaborate designer gown she'd originally chosen, but her mother's dress taken in and updated by Mrs. Chen from the alteration shop downtown. She looked exactly like Jennifer had on our wedding day 30 years ago, but with her own unique beauty shining through. You look... I started, then stopped, my throat tight with emotion. I look like Mom, she finished. You look like yourself. And you're beautiful. Emily walked to her dresser and picked up something I recognized, her mother's jewelry box, the one Jennifer had kept her grandmother's pearls in. I found these when I was going through Mom's things, she said, holding up a pair of pearl earrings. She left a note with them. It's addressed to both of us. She handed me a small envelope with Jennifer's handwriting, for Robert and Emily on her wedding day. I opened it with shaking hands and read aloud. My dearest Robert and Emily, if you're reading this, it means our little girl has found someone worthy of the love you taught her to give. Robert, thank you for showing her what real strength looks like. Emily, thank you for choosing love over fear. Remember that the best marriages aren't built on what you have, but on who you are together. Dance to your own music, build your own traditions, and never forget that love is the only thing that matters in the end. All my love, Jennifer. We both cried then, holding each other in the bedroom where I'd once read bedtime stories and helped with homework where Emily had practiced for school plays and cried over broken hearts. She knew, Emily whispered. She knew I'd need to hear that. Your mother was a smart woman. She knew a lot of things. 20 minutes later, I walked my daughter down the makeshift aisle between those borrowed church chairs, past faces that glowed with genuine affection rather than social obligation. Jake's sound system crackled to life with Etta James singing, At Last. And I saw Michael waiting at the altar we'd built together, his face bright with joy. When we reached the front, the minister, Father Miguel from the church where Emily had been baptized, asked who was giving this woman in marriage. Her mother and I do, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet of my backyard. With love, with pride, and with faith in the man she's chosen. I kissed Emily's cheek and placed her hand in Michael's, then stepped back to watch my daughter marry the man who'd learned to see her the way I'd always seen her, as someone worth loving, exactly as she was. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and utterly perfect. Emily's vows made half the congregation cry, including me. She talked about learning the difference between success and happiness, about choosing authenticity over image, about being grateful for the foundation that had made everything else possible. Michael's vows were even better. He promised to honor not just Emily, but the family that had shaped her. He promised to never let her forget where she came from or doubt where she was going. He promised to be worthy of the love of a man who had taught his daughter what real sacrifice looked like. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers that probably violated several noise ordinances. Mrs. Johnson threw rice despite Emily's protests about the birds. Jake's sound system chose that moment to play Born to Run at full volume, and nobody seemed to mind. The reception was everything the Ritz-Carlton event wasn't: loud, chaotic, joyful, and real. Michael's father spent an hour talking shop with my buddy Mike about carburetor repair. Emily's Harvard friends learned a line dance from my cousin Betty. The wedding cake was from the grocery store bakery, and it was delicious. As the sun set and the lights came on, I found myself standing at the edge of the celebration, watching Emily and Michael dance to an old Motown song while their guests clapped along. She caught my eye across the yard and mouthed, "Thank you," and I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Hell of a party, Davis. I turned to find Jake beside me, beer in hand, grinning at the controlled chaos we'd created. "Yeah, it is. You did good raising that girl. We all did good tonight." Later, after the last guest had gone home and the cleanup was done, Emily and Michael sat with me on my back deck, all of us too tired and happy to move. Emily had changed into jeans and one of my old work shirts, and she looked more like herself than she had in years. "So, what now?" Michael asked. "Honeymoon in Paris, tour of Europe." Emily looked at me, then at her new husband. "Actually, I was thinking we could spend a few days here. I'd like to show you the town where I grew up. The real town, not the sanitized version I've been presenting." "I'd love that," Michael said, and I could tell he meant it. "And, Dad," Emily continued, "I want to learn about the business, the real business. Not just the garage, but everything you did to build the life I took for granted. I want to understand where I came from, so I can figure out where I'm going." I smiled, thinking about Jennifer and how proud she would be of the woman our daughter had become, not because of her Harvard degree or her law career, but because she'd found her way back to the values we'd tried to teach her. "I'd like that too, sweetheart." As I watched my daughter and her husband head inside to start their new life together, I realized something important. True class really isn't about money or status or keeping up appearances. It's about knowing who you are, honoring where you came from, and never being ashamed of the love that made you possible. And sometimes it takes losing everything to remember what really matters. Emily had learned that lesson the hard way, but she'd learned it completely, and that I thought was worth more than all the Harvard degrees in the world. The backyard was quiet now. Just me and the lingering scent of Mrs. Johnson's flowers and the distant sound of my daughter's laughter drifting through the screen door. I picked up the last empty beer bottle, turned off the lights, and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to show love through sacrifice. But tonight, I was just a father who'd watched his daughter come home, and that was enough. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments. What's the greatest sacrifice a parent has made for you that you didn't realize at the time? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that true love often works behind the scenes and that the greatest gifts come from the humblest hands. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss stories that matter. Your support helps us bring you more real-life dramas that remind us what family truly means. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most important inheritance we can leave our children isn't money, it's character.